Hello everyone and welcome to the Ticker.com's news channel on YouTube. On this channel, we review stock markets and discuss financial news, market trends, and economic data from Wall Street to Global Street. So let's jump in. Market indices advanced on the final trading day of August month and ended the volatile month on a higher note. The S&P 500 index and the Nasdaq Composite trimmed their weekly and monthly losses. In August, the S&P 500 index advanced 2% and the Nasdaq Composite gained 0.2%. Investor sentiment recovered from sharp losses of as much as 10% over the two-week period ending in the first week in August, driven by the fears of an economic slowdown and weakening labor market conditions. However, those fears turned out to be unfounded after a string of positive economic data in the second half of the month, fueling a market rally that lasted 3 weeks. Market sentiment also improved after Fed Chair signaled monetary policy adjustments, providing another boost to the broader market rally last week. On Friday, the Fed's alternative measure of inflation highlighted mixed picture on the inflation front. The core personal consumption expenditure price index increased on a monthly basis by 0.2%, matching the increase in the previous month, the Bureau of Economic Analysis reported Friday. On an annual basis, the overall PCE price index advanced 2.5%, matching the rate in the previous month, indicating prices are still rising at a pace faster than the Fed's 2% target rate. The core PCE price index, which excludes volatile food and energy prices, rose 2.6% and held steady for the third month in a row. Investors are still anticipating that the Federal Reserve is ready to start its interest rate cycle as early as next month, but those hopes could be dashed if policymakers decide to wait more evidence for the downward path for inflation. Despite the slowdown in inflation, prices are still rising from a higher base and consumers are still battling with high cost of living. The U.S. economic growth in the second quarter was revised higher to 3% from the previous estimate of 2.8% and from 1.4% in the first quarter, the Bureau of Economic Analysis reported on Thursday. The GDP revision confirmed that the economy is still growing at a strong pace despite the Fed's restrictive interest rate policies. The Eurozone inflation slowed to 2.2% in August from 2.6% in July, according to preliminary estimates released by Eurostat. The decline in inflation was driven by the sustained cooling of volatile energy prices from a year ago, but inflation in the broader economy remained well entrenched and above the central bank's target rate of 2%. The core rate of inflation, which excludes energy and unprocessed food, remained unchanged at 2.8%, indicating a difficult road ahead for policymakers. Passenger car registrations in the European Union slowed to 0.2% in July from 4.3% in prior month. Car registration increased to 852,000 units in July, driven by mixed results in the four largest markets in the region. Battery electric car registration declined 11% to 102,700 units, with total market share shrank to 12% from 13.5% a year earlier, driven largely by the decline of 37% in Germany. Hybrid electric vehicles continue to be in favor in July, with car registrations rising by 26% to 273,000 units. In Asia, Japan's retail sales increase slowed in July but rose for the 28th consecutive month as rising wages continued to support consumption. India's second quarter GDP growth slowed to 6.7% from 7.8% in the first quarter after national election halted several government activities during the quarter. In Europe, Germany's jobless rate held at 6% for the third month in a row in August. Eurozone's lending growth accelerated to an 8-month high, and consumer price inflation in Spain, France, and Germany was on the downward trend. In other economic news around the world, Japan's jobless rate edged higher to 2.7%. Inflation in Tokyo area accelerated for the fourth month in a row, suggesting higher inflation across the nation, and China's industrial profits rose 3.6% in the 7-month period to July. Let us review key events in global bond, currency, and commodity markets last week. The yield on the 10-year U.S. Treasury hovered below 3.9% for the fourth week after inflation outlook met investors' expectations. Crude oil prices fell 2% to below $74 a barrel and declined for the fourth week in a row, following reports that the OPEC Plus is on course to carry out its planned production hike in the fourth quarter. Natural gas prices rose nearly 10% to an 8-month high of 39 euros per megawatt hour due to supply concerns related to Norway's annual maintenance and ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. The euro eased from a 2-year high of $1.10 after the recent inflation data supported a rate cut after the policy meeting on September 12th. The yen strengthened to 145 against the US dollar and gained for the second month in a row as the Bank of Japan retained its hawkish outlook. We now shift our attention to major stock markets in the US, Europe, and Asia. The S&P 500 index and the Nasdaq Composite halted a 3-week rally, and market indices erased losses earlier in the month. European markets advanced for the fourth consecutive week after weakening inflation in the region raised rate cut expectations. The Nikkei 225 stock average extended gains for the fourth week in a row after Tokyo area inflation accelerated, retail sales growth slowed, and industrial production outlook remained uncertain. Hong Kong indices rebounded for the fourth week in a row and jumped to a 2-month high after electric vehicles maker reported higher earnings despite margin weakness. Indian market indices extended gains for the third week in a row, but closed second quarter growth slowed to 6.7%, raising the prospect of market volatility next week. Let us shift our attention to merger deals, market movers, and earnings updates from leading companies last week. NVIDIA, the leading artificial intelligence technology player, reported revenue in the latest quarter more than doubled and net income nearly tripled on the continued demand for its chips. Lululemon, the athleisure retailer, reported mixed quarterly results, and same-store sales growth continued to be on a downward trend. Ulta Beauty dropped 7%, and the cosmetic retailer reported weaker than estimated second quarter sales. The cosmetic retailer lowered its full-year sales outlook following the decline in comparable store sales. Dell Technologies increased 5%, and the personal computer and data server company reported earnings ahead of market expectations. MongoDB soared 17%, and the database developers' revenues and earnings were ahead of market expectations. The company lifted its full-year sales and adjusted earnings outlook. Salesforce increased 5%, and the customer relation management software developer reported better than expected fiscal second quarter results. Dollar General plunged 26% after the discount store chain reported weaker than estimated sales and earnings in the latest quarter and slashed its annual outlook. Best Buy soared 14% after the electronics retailer reported better than estimated profit and lifted its annual adjusted earnings outlook. Abercrombie & Fitch, the specialty apparel retailer, reported higher sales and earnings in its fiscal second quarter, and the company lifted its annual outlook. Foot Locker, the footwear retailer, reported better than expected sales and smaller than expected losses in the latest quarter. JD.com, the China-based shopping platform operator, announced a $5 billion stock buyback after quarterly earnings nearly doubled. In the week ahead, investors in the U.S. are looking ahead to the release of private manufacturing and service surveys, non-farm payrolls, JOLT survey, and updates on factory orders and international trade balance. In Europe, investors are looking forward to the release of tourist arrivals and car sales updates in Spain, the manufacturing and service sector surveys in the Eurozone. Investors are also awaiting the release of retail sales updates in the Eurozone and Italy, international trade balance in Germany and France, and the third and the final estimates of the second quarter GDP growth in the Eurozone. In Asia, investors are looking forward to the release of foreign exchange reserves in Japan, a private survey of service sector, and growth in bank loans and deposits and foreign exchange in India. You can review daily U.S. and global financial market news, stock movers, earnings releases, SEC filings, and economic updates on ticker.com and 123jump.com. You can find the latest financial books on Rodera.com, keep up with financial industry events on eventsinamerica.com, review ETF and mutual fund performance and in-depth profiles on tickerfunds.com, and review market updates and stock movers in India on niveshak.in. That is all for today, and we will see you